welcome to FI for Kids, the podcast about guiding your kids on the path to financial independence and extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Dominic DeLaquil. Our guest today is Jeff Kikel. Jeff is a chartered financial consultant, a serial entrepreneur, and the author of Freedom Day, Plan Your Exit from Your Job or Business. It's about setting yourself up for financial independence and reaching your Freedom Day, the day when work becomes totally optional. We're going to discuss his 8-step process to reach your Freedom Day and how parents and young adults can use those steps to get a head start on their journey to FI. Welcome, Jeff, and thanks for coming on the show.
I'm glad to be on today. Looking forward to our conversation.
Let's start with you just telling us a little bit about what you learned about money.
This will be short. Nothing. My parents, we never talked about money. I'm sure they never talked about money with their parents. It was just kind of taboo. We didn't really discuss it. Several times during my, I would say my high school years, my dad was an engineer by trade and worked in the aerospace industry, which if you know anything about that industry, it's feast or famine when it comes to jobs. And so he lost a lot of jobs along the way. Nothing to do with him. It just, you lose a contract and you don't need as many people. So, I kind of experienced that from their perspective of, there were times when I was the only child and, I got pretty much what I wanted or, within reason, and times that I didn't get anything that I wanted because my dad was at home because he was trying to look for another job. And so, we just didn't discuss the finances. I didn't really learn anything about finances when I was growing up. Certainly our education system doesn't teach you anything about finances. I think I remember learning how to balance a checkbook, which I don't think anybody has done in the last 100 years. Even though they'll tell you they do, they don't. So I didn't really know anything about it. So I went off, joined the military so that I could go to college later, and spent money pretty much as I wanted to then, didn't really save much, and got out, went into college, and I kept going around, and there were these cool guys that had like a t-shirt or a hat and said, hey, just sign here and you can get a credit card and all that. And by the time I left college, I left with zero college debt and about $15,000 in credit card debt because I just didn't really have any control over money, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I know background now.
I didn't know what I was doing. It was just like, hey, this is free money, and I can go buy concert tickets and clothing and beer money on Friday. So I never was out of beer money because as long as the credit cards had a balance on them.
Yeah, right. Well, and you think, well, I'll pay this later, and then you don't, because you just don't have the discipline or the understanding.
And it wasn't really until I got. And my first jobs, I have a degree in psychology with a minor in English literature, and I went into advertising, was a copywriter. There was nothing money focused about that. It's a creative job, so it's a little bit different. It really wasn't until I had been traveling a bunch and I went to work in the financial services industry and started to realize, wow, there's a reason why they call people in the financial services industry a broker, because they're typically broker than their clients at that point. And that was kind of the aha moment for me. I read Dave Ramsey's book, Total Money Makeover, and applied the techniques. Within somewhere around a year and a half, I'd paid off all my debt and really started to build my empire from there.
Yeah. So you've done a variety of different businesses. So after you got into the financial industry a little bit, paid off your debt, and then started doing your own thing, talk about that journey and then how you found your way to your Freedom Day when you were 55.
So I'll start with, I worked for a great company that I absolutely loved, and I thought that I would work there for the rest of my life. Life was going to be good. I was just going to retire from the company. I would have enough money and everything would be awesome. I'd always said when I first started learning how to do financial planning, I started doing the math and I'm like, by 55, I want to be retired. And then life happens, and you start working and you make more money and you spend as much as you're making and everything else. And, it's just amazing how your lifestyle can adjust to whatever you're making. And then 2003 hit. And we'd had 3 down years in a row in the stock market. And the company I was working for decided that, well, we don't really need you guys that are in this one specific department, which I just happen to be in. And all of a sudden I went from, hey, I'm the company man, everything's going to be awesome, to holy crap, I'm the breadwinner for the family and I don't have a job. Fortunately, I also worked with some very high profile clients who reached out to, they just kept going up the line until they eventually got to like the guy who worked for the guy who ran the company. And they were like, hey, this guy is my guy. And if he leaves and he goes someplace else, I'm leaving and going with him. You know, it effectively, amazingly, our jobs reappeared overnight because other clients were doing the same thing. And so our jobs reappeared, but the person inside the company that we work for was like, okay, guys, I got you covered for the next year, but your jobs are going away. So you got to find something else. Well, you know, at that point, all of a sudden now I'm waking up every day thinking about, oh crap, am I going to lose my job? And so I really went through this period of, well, maybe I need to have something that's going to protect me. You know, at that point I knew I kind of wanted to start my own business, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I kept trying, failing. So I tried 7 businesses that failed miserably. Largely it was because of commitment. You know, I mean, it was just, I wasn't completely committed because I made a whole lot of money over here. And when this got hard, it was like, well, it's just easier to give it up and stop. So, you know, that was.
So it's kind of the classic good is the enemy of great sort of a thing almost. Yeah.
I look back now and I go, man, that sucks, because that was my opportunity to build that little side hustle on the side. And had I done that correctly, I would have had that side hustle that would have replaced my income and it would have given me a choice. Fast forward 20 years, well, fast forward, let's call it 15 years at this point. I had moved to Austin, was with a new company. 2 years later, I realized why I never worked for a public company, because they're different than working for a private company. And I started to really realize, okay, I need to get out. I could see the handwriting on the wall, and that was really my, okay, time to bail. It wasn't my freedom day, by the way. This was my, okay, I'm going to go make my way by myself. And I had been kind of thinking about being an entrepreneur, but this was my, okay, this is going to be the time. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And I pitched to 17 different bankers, finally found one that was as crazy as I was, a little guy from West Texas that had moved to Austin. And we partnered up together, built a co-working space. And in the process, because I had been in the financial services industry and had clients, I also launched a financial practice. So I'm launching 2 brand new businesses at exactly the same time. Would never do that, by the way. Don't do that. Do it as a side hustle and then build that up and go. Yeah. Bad way to do it, but when you learn about the steps of Freedom Day process, you're going to learn that I made every bad mistake that you possibly could make. So I hope that helps you to get your way through the process better. There's a lot of ups and downs in the interim time. In my book, I go through the whole detail of it, but there was a lot of times I wanted to quit, and we should have probably quit. But, 10 years later, I reached age 55. I sold a business that I had built to my business partner, and I was at my Freedom Day. I've woken up every day since, not having to get up and go to work.
You do still choose
Absolutely.
To do things, but that's your choice, which is the whole point of your Freedom
Day. I probably work
right?
harder than I ever did today because I'm building additional sources of revenue. So that still requires work. It's just the type of work that I build today is businesses that do not require me to be intimately involved in the process. I automate more of my businesses and I build things more passive income wise today, which is what I learned.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. So let's dive into then the Freedom Day book. So it's an 8-step process you talk about in there. I'm just going to review those real quick and then let's dive into the details. So you start with budgeting, which makes sense, right? You got to know where your money is. You got to know what's coming in, what's going out, right?
Because if you don't, you're up a creek. You're just never going to get there.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And then you build a bucket list, which is an interesting concept. So that'll be fun to talk about that one. And then step 3 is retrain your brain. 4 is getting out of debt. 5 is you're going to take the income sources that were for step number 3, which is retraining your brain, and you're going to try and expand those and grow them so that they're bringing in more income than where they started. And you do that until step 6 is you reach your freedom day. And that is you've got your monthly expenses plus 20% covered. And that means, hey, where you're at, right? I don't have to go to work if I don't want to. I don't have to work. If I love my job, I want to keep doing it, great. If I want to build other businesses like you're doing, that's great. If I want to take, I just want to never work again or take a year off and think about what to do, whatever it is, right? It's up to you. And then 7 is, 7. So 6 is you reach freedom day. 7 is you decide whether to stay or go. So that's, do I want to work? Do I not? Sorry. And then 8 is really just sort of living that freedom day
Absolutely.
lifestyle.
You got them all.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit at the beginning. Let's talk about budget and then get into the bucket list, because that's not something that usually you hear about early on in a financial process.
So, the typical route that somebody teaches it, Dave Ramsey, anybody like that, typical route is, well, you got to come up with a budget first. I mean, I think that's the core of everything, and it's very simple. This doesn't have to be super complicated. You need to know what's coming in and what's going out. And if more is coming in than going out, that's positive cash flow. If more is going out than coming in, that's negative cash flow. And you got to reverse that. So there's only 2 ways to reverse it. You either increase income or you make those expenses less. Maybe you need to do both. So it's not brain surgery or rocket surgery or whatever you want to call it. It's just literally looking at what's coming in, looking what's going out. What can you change there to at least change the equation to where you have at least $1 more left at the end of the month, to where you're at least moving in a positive direction. You got to do that first. Then you step into step number 2 that I have in the process, which is build your bucket list. This is something that no other advisor will tell you to do, because usually the next step is, well, you've got to get yourself out of debt. So that is a negative thing. And people's brains are not trained to deal with negative things. Negative things like, hey, I've got to cut my expenses. I've got to spend, that money that I want to spend on Netflix. I'm going to spend reducing debt. That is not a positive thing. And so not positive things we just don't do. So one of the things I am is a student of psychology. I have a degree in it, and investor psychology really makes me happy because it does not work when there is negative stuff. So one of the things I learned, and it was actually the last part of this whole process, it was after I'd reached my freedom day, really right around the time that my partner had come to me and decided that he wanted to buy the business and take it a different direction. And I just happened to have a week in California. I'd won a trip and I was out in California. My wife didn't come with me and I was alone in a hotel room all by myself. And one of the things they gave us at this conference was a bucket list journal. And the gentleman who had written it, his name is Ben Nemtin, really changed my life. Ben had written this book called All the Things You Want to Do Before You Die. And he was giving this bucket list thing for us at the conference. And there was an aha moment at the end of the week after I'd filled it out where I went, crap, this is what has been missing in financial planning for years, because we teach all the negative stuff to get to the positive in the end instead of start with, the budget's kind of maybe negative, but it's something you have to do, and then reward yourself with being able to dream about the future. And then what we do.
Because that's your motivation,
it's what
right?
motivates
That's
you.
the motivation to have the discipline to do all the other stuff you need to do to get there.
And it becomes this little reward system that every day, every time I think about it, I think of the movie Joe versus the Volcano. And if you've ever seen that movie, he slogs in every day and they're playing the 15 tons and what do you get song. And, he goes into this horrible cubicle. And that's what's in my brain every day, slogging into work and having no thought of what the future is going to look like, and everything was kind of shot in this gray kind of patina or whatever. And that's kind of what I thought about when I was going to my job after I'd gotten laid off. That was what it felt like every day. And so having this little reward system along the way and having a, hey, this is where we're going type of a thing, that was what was missing. And that was my aha moment of saying, hey, this needs to be shoved to the front. Then we need to go to the next step, which is retraining our brain. Because what we're taught as employees is we go into work, we sell our bodies and a little bit of our knowledge and our time to an employer who then pays us a certain amount of money that they're willing to pay us. And then in the end, we have to make decisions of, if I want to do this, I either have to save up for it, I either have to not do it, or I have to put it on a...
By do this, just to clarify real quick, Jeff, to do this,
something
you mean
off
something
my
off
bucket
the bucket
list.
list.
Or any kind of a big purchase like that. I have to make that decision of, do I have the money? Do I save up for the money? Or do I just not do it because I don't have enough money? By retraining your brain, what I want you to do is think like an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur goes, not, do I have the money or do I put it on a credit card? An entrepreneur goes, what can I do to get that piece? So what we do is we make it very simple. Out of that list of 100 things that we make, and it's in a bunch of different categories, but 100 things, we have them pick 3 things. 3 things that cost less than $500 and can be done in 6 months or less. That's it. We're not doing any major things. We're not doing anything really life-changing. Could be. But it's under $500 and it's in less than 6 months. The reason is, 1, I want it to be time-bound and I want them to have a deadline. 2, $500 is not that much. I mean, I can think of 100 different ways to make $500 today. So what I want people to do is start thinking about that. So they start to think about, what can I do to generate that? Easiest way is probably not the best in the long run, but the easiest way is sell your knowledge for $500. So if you know something, everybody has some kind of skill. So you can either create a course, you can go on to Upwork or Fiverr. If you've got some kind of skill that maybe is like a graphic skill, or maybe it's, I'm a secretary and I'm really good about organizing this type of stuff. Go on to Upwork, go on to Fiverr, look at what people are selling their time for, or their knowledge for. And if you find something that you go, hey, I can do that, that's easy, put yourself out there and get your $500.
So just to jump in real quick. So, because even young adults, right? So a kid that's not been out of the house for very long, even a kid that's still in the house, and they're trying to move themselves ahead because they start to get that glimpse of, I don't want to be stuck doing this for the next 40 plus years. What are my other options? And so they could take skills that they have, and we didn't talk about this, but they could take, especially for kids these days, so much social media skills, and maybe they've really been into their Instagram account and they've really gotten good, or they've got a YouTube stuff they've done and they're really good at video editing and putting together cool sort of engaging videos that they've just done for fun, but that's a marketable skill. It's an incredibly
marketable skill.
Right? Yeah, right. And if they've got 6 months to come up with that $500, that should be, if they're willing to put themselves out there, even kids could.
Well, here, I'll give you a perfect example of this. So I teach at a local incubator program. And so I'm part of the board, and I also come in and I'll teach on certain skill sets and stuff like that. And PowerPoint presentations that these kids put together through Canva are some of the best, literally some of the best that I've ever seen. I mean, they have this incredible skill, and they're learning this when they're in high school. And I've hired multitudes of these guys over the years of being, I've been involved in this program for like 8 years. And so every year there's like a couple of really super talented people that have put these amazing presentations together, and I hire them to, when I have to get a presentation together, or if I need, if I'm writing a course or something like that, and I need that to look really sharp, I hire them. I pay them $500 easy, because I don't want to have to do it. And then they are going to do it way faster and way better than I'm ever going to do it. All I have to do is give them the basics and go. There are amazing people around the world that are just crazy talented that you can get for a very small amount of money. And, for these guys, it's a portfolio item when they're doing their college stuff, where
Yes.
they're like, hey, I've got a design business because I've helped them do this. All right, we're going to create your design business. And, you're going to do some work for me for like 3 or 4 different businesses, and that's going to become your portfolio. And,
exactly.
they do that, and they're making $500, and $500 for them is a lot of money.
Yeah, right. Well, and you're getting a great product that you don't want to spend your time doing because you'd rather spend that time doing something else. And you're helping them. Not just their portfolio, but helping them increase confidence. They're learning things from you along the way. They're working with a client, so they've got to then understand, okay, how do I interact with clients? How do I take what I've given them, the early footage, and then take feedback and then improve it to give them what they want? I mean, all those kind of things. And you're helping not just their portfolio, but helping to build their skill set.
And it's not Jeff, the nice guy who comes in and teaches us about sales or marketing. It's Jeff, the client now, who switches gears a lot and is like, okay, I am very demanding because I'm paying you to do this. Now, flip that around from your point of view of talking about, parents teaching kids about this stuff. Okay, yes, you've come up with your bucket list. Maybe you come up with a bucket list as a family. Why not start your little idea of what you're going to do with your kids and get them involved? And so they're not going to have to go work for 30 years and figure the stuff out that it sucks. Maybe they can get started a lot earlier, and you guys as a family can build a really cool little business, and maybe dad's really good with finance, and little Johnny is fantastic with social media stuff, and little Janie is really good with presentations and things like that, and mom's a great kind of project manager for all this stuff, or maybe mom's the great salesperson. Boom, you have an instant little company, and you all are learning this together, and you can then apply that $500 or $1,000 that you've made to, hey, you know what? We want to go to Disney this year, or we want to do this or whatever. Whatever that $500 project is, boom, you get to go do it. And you get to have fun doing it together.
Today's episode is sponsored by Slingshot, a Singleton Foundation program. Slingshot is a free web app that makes it easy for anyone to create and launch a business idea. It guides you through the process of creating and clarifying your concept, then leads you into areas necessary for any business, such as identifying your target customer, making your financial plan, your marketing plan, and more. Puts you in a better position to seek funding if you're wanting to start your own business, but you can also use it if you're working for someone else and you want to solve a problem within your current organization. Visit slingshot.io to learn more, and thanks to Slingshot and the Singleton Foundation for sponsoring this episode. Yeah, that's great. And so then we're back around to, so you're picking something off the bucket list, finding a way to come up with that money, and if ideally you create some sort of a side hustle type business to earn that money, because then now you've got this thing, you've developed this skill set, you've increased some confidence, and then we'll get to that in a second, but you can continue to use that as you go forward. So retraining your brain is, hey, I'm not stuck in this cubicle forever. I've got these things I want to do in my life. So back to where, just to summarize, right? In 6 months, I've narrowed it down to 3 that I can do for $500 or less and do them in 6 months.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll give you an example, like in my case. So after I'd sold the business, I had more money than I needed. And I was like, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to do this myself. And so I had time on my hands. So I said, you know what? There's 12 things that I want to do. And it always revolves around planes, trains, or automobiles. That's the stuff that I love. And so all I said was, okay, let me look at my list. And of the 12 of the things on my 100 involve planes, trains, or automobiles. They were all basically $500 or less. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do is if I'm going to believe in this, I'm not going to take money from the sale of the business. I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to create this thing myself. And so what I ended up doing is I was experimenting with some stuff in the real estate industry. And what I effectively did is I ended up buying for tax lien properties, and I owned those properties. I bought them from a state where I could actually get the tax lien, and the property after about a month was mine. And then I just turned around and I became the bank. And I basically found somebody that wanted to buy it, and I financed the thing. And the combined total of those 4 properties was $500 a month. And I went, all right, we have the money for Jeff's planes, trains, and automobiles thing. And for the next year, I went and did that. All the things that I'd ever wanted to do, planes, trains, and automobiles, I went and did 1 per month, documented as I was going. And then when I got done, I was like, okay, I've got that $500 a month. What did I do? I saved it up for a few more months, bought some more tax liens, and started to increase the amount of that income. That original $500 a month is now close to about $3,000 a month, and I do 0 work. So I'm what a bank does. They lend money, and I get paid back with interest, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, and what's cool about that is when you made the decision to, hey, I'm not going to do this from the money from the sale of the business, right? You had that. You could have done that. Would have been easy. But you pushed yourself a little bit to try out this process. And I think what's cool about that for other people is you're setting up this motivation. That's where we get back to the bucket list and retraining your brain all fits together. I have these things I really want to do, and I'm committed to this process. Now you've got, okay, I have to find a way to make this happen, right? And because it kind of goes back to where you started, you didn't start the side hustles, or you had different ideas for entrepreneurial things before.
Failed miserably.
But it was too easy not to push through because you had a good paying job.
Yes.
Right? So in this case, the motivation is, hey, I'm going to go do these things. I mean, your case, it was a little bit different because you were trying to then like sort of do a proof of concept, right? Or test this idea that you had. But even then it worked out even better because it became not just, it funded these 12 things I wanted to do, but it's still working for you today, passive income.
Recurring revenue every single month, and it keeps building because I just, what happens is it was money I didn't need. So every time that recurred, okay, so now I have $3,000 that comes in. Okay, well, do I have enough to find another tax lien someplace? Yeah, okay, I can easily find a tax lien for $3,000 someplace, maybe even a couple for that. Boom, okay, then repeat the process. And that just keeps building and building. So that's one very large, it started what I would consider relatively small, and it kept building. And that also funds my investment accounts where I do some other stuff that generates income. And so, it's retraining my brain to think like a rich person, which a rich person doesn't go and buy stuff.
Yeah.
A rich person goes, how do I take something that's making me money and turn it into something else that's making me money? And then maybe from that I'll buy some toys. But they also tend to buy stuff like artwork and collectibles and things like that, or they buy other businesses to generate more stuff or more income. So you've got to think like a rich person does or like a business owner does and say, okay, what can I do to start generating additional dollars? And that's when it gets fun. That 6-month retraining your brain thing is just a short little piece of the pie.
Well, that's just to get you started, right? And so you can see how if you can start that process when you're younger, or as parents, if you can start teaching the concept to your kids, because whether you do a family business, which is a great idea, or you just encourage your kids to find some skill that they have and do a little bit with it, it doesn't matter how much they're making. If you can start to plant those seeds, then they understand, I can take, right? Because it's no different than when you go get a job, right? Just like you said, you're trading your time for money, and you've got some sort of skills that either you have that you take to get the job or that you learn on the job, but you can do that for yourself. Most people just don't think of it. So I think that brings us back around to you're retraining your brain to think, hey, I can do things for myself and earn money. And the more you do that, the more you start to see, I can do this, and then start to look for other possibilities. And the younger you start,
you don't get beat down for 20 years before you have to retrain you're training your brain from the very beginning instead of having to retrain it. And the earlier you can do that, for you as a parent, It's your kids, they are a freaking sponge. So don't treat them like kids. Treat them like, hey, they know they're going to be able to figure this stuff out. So what jazzes them, what makes them happy, encourage it.
Yeah. It just depends what their interests and skill sets and aptitudes are, and then help them, encourage them to develop those, and then find a way to make money. So then that's the retraining your brain. So you do your bucket list.
So we've made $1,500 in 6 months. We've done 3 of these things. So now our brain's retrained, and we should have roughly about $500 a month at least coming in from whatever our little gig is, side gig is. Well, guess what? We can take that $500 and now apply it towards debt. And the way we apply it towards debt's the way I learned it from Dave Ramsey, which I think is still the best way to do it, is what's called a debt snowball. And what you do is you stack your smallest debt to your largest debt. Figure out what the minimum payments are for each of those. Interest rate doesn't matter. It's just the balances, and then it's your minimum payment. And you look at, what do I have extra in my budget? So from the first step, what do I have extra that I've got out of, what I'm doing that way? And then my extra $500, I'm going to take that and apply all of that to the first debt. And I'm going to just go at that and beat that thing down until it's gone. And then when it's gone, I take whatever my minimum payment plus my $500 plus whatever, and I'm going to apply that to the second debt. And that's going to start accelerating.
Yeah. So now by the time you get to your bigger debt sort of at the end, you've now got this massive payment you're throwing at it, because if you've eliminated the smaller ones, every little bit that you were paying on those just gets added to the snowball. Yep.
My little side hustle, I've continued to build it, because now I see this positive thing happening. When all of a sudden you're down to like the last debt, and wow, I'm applying like $1,500 a month towards this thing, and it's going away fast. So all of a sudden that equation at the beginning that was maybe $1 better is now $2,000 better. And when I start to look at, without that debt payment, what exactly is what I call MRI, my minimum required income? And for most people, once you pay that debt off, I don't say pay off your house, but I say pay off all the consumer debt, everything else. Now, let's say that's $4,000 or $5,000 that I've whacked out of my budget that I don't have to pay anymore. Well, now I may only need $4,000 or $5,000 to live on, and I've got $3,000 coming in. Now I can really accelerate that growth to get that above 5,000 plus 20%, little wiggle room, and now I get to my freedom day.
And when you say accelerate your growth, you're talking about accelerating the growth of these little side hustles you started to do your bucket list items. So that's how it all then starts to tie together and build on itself.
We got out of debt with a positive. Yeah. Now we've grown this business and we've seen, man, this is like extra income coming in every month. This is awesome. Maybe we're going to apply some of that to other things that are going to generate income. Maybe we're going to put some money into dividend paying stocks, or we're going to use some income producing, option strategies or something like that, where, okay, these are all things now we're diversifying from just that one little side hustle to, hey, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different ways that we're now making money. They may not all be making 3,000, but combined, maybe they're 5,000 or 6,000 together. And now I start looking at, well, okay, my salary is maybe $150,000 a year, but after reducing my debt, I'm only really spending about 60 at that point.
Yeah. So Jeff, I just want to go back to the very beginning, because you're talking about your MRI, right? Your minimum required income. And that takes us back ultimately to step one, which is your budget. You've got to know what you're spending, right? And so you know what that minimum required income is, because some of that is going to be discretionary spending. But that's where you've got to also know yourself and know, hey, you know what? There are things that really matter to me that I have to include as part of what I spend. But you know what? Other things, I've been spending money on those and I really don't get that much joy or value out of them. I can do without those and my quality of life doesn't go down at all. I'm going to take those out. That's how I decrease some expenses. Once you start that budgeting process, right? Or at least I'm going to phrase it differently. Once you start tracking your money, because budgeting like gives some people like PTSD, right? So once you start tracking your money, really, I do that every Saturday, and it takes me 15 minutes. I make sure, here's the stuff that I've paid on credit cards because I use that because I want those rewards points, and I make sure nothing funky's going on. I track it. I know what the income is, so I get a cup of coffee. It takes me 15 minutes on Saturday morning, and I know where I'm at. And then if I see, I want to make adjustments, like, you know what? We've been spending quite a bit more money going out to eat than this past month. Then you know what, we let's knock that back down because we want to have this money to allocate to something else. But you've got to know those things in order to know what your MRI, your minimum required income is. Because if you don't know that, how the heck can you know what your Freedom Day is?
And then all that's going to happen is, what did I tell you about myself? Every time I got a raise, I just adjusted my lifestyle to that instead of being, like I said, Dave Ramsey, people will disparage him at times, but from that budgeting, that basics level, that grandma with the envelopes level, that's the stuff that is just the absolute basics. And I would say the other part that I learned in this process was, I'm the finance guy. So my wife's like, you got it. Now we're both sitting down together and we're going over this because I don't want to be fighting with you about, well, why can't we do this? You need to understand how the money's coming in and all that. And it's something that I wish my parents had done with me of when my dad was out of work and stuff like that. I knew that there wasn't as much money, but it would have been fine to sit down and go, well, this is why. This is why we can't go do what you want to do because of this. So make it a positive once again. Okay, this is why we can't do it. What could we do to be able to do the thing that you want to do? What can you do? Yeah. What could we do as a family to be able to do what you want to do? That becomes a positive. So if we then bounce back to where we were at, okay, now we've grown and grown and grown and grown, and we keep looking at our budget because it was a great way that you went back to this. Keep looking at our budget, and remember, our MRI has probably changed pretty significantly because now we've added this huge chunk of money on and taken off debt. So now our equation is really good. And now we just need to look at, okay, the day that we have enough income coming in that we're at our MRI, so let's say that's $5,000 plus 20%. Mm-hmm. So let's call it $6.5 grand. That's our MRI plus 20%. You woke up that morning and went to work and you didn't have to do it. Then you do reach a point where it's, do you stay or do you go? And people ask me all the time, and this is funny, when I talk about this, they're like, do I have to quit my job? And I tell them this very simply. If you love what you do today, would you get up and do that? Would you go to work if you didn't have to worry about money and you continued to do the work that you do today? If the answer is yes, then don't quit your job. Now, you may not work as hard as you were working before. You may not work all those extra hours that you were working before because you may not necessarily want those promotions that are going to take up more of your time. You don't have to worry about money anymore, so anything you're making is just fun money at that point. I just look at it as my paycheck now is my fun money to go just do anything I want to do. And my money that's coming in from my little hustles and businesses, that's paying me, that's taking care of my life. Now, the opposite side, if you hate what you do today, the day you reach Freedom Day, you probably want to consider quitting at that point because you are going to be the worst employee that has ever existed. Because you don't have to be there anymore. You don't have to take the crap from people. You don't have to work 90 hours a week because you're worried about losing your job. If you don't like what you do, you need to start planning your exit and figuring out the next step. And the next step then is you've got to live the Freedom Day lifestyle. So if you're staying and you're working for a few more years, Freedom Day lifestyle may be, hey guys, I'm going to take like 2 weeks off and I'm going to go do something really big off my bucket list. Now you've got an operating agreement. You've got a roadmap for what life is going to look like because you did that bucket list early on and you've lived out some of that bucket list. And what you've done is you've replaced whatever you took off the list, you've added some more stuff in because now it's like, hey, I've got all this time and I could do this. You haven't quite bought yourself time at this point if you keep working. But you can pretty much tell your boss, you know what, I don't really have to be working here anymore. I do it because I want to, but I'm going to go take 3 weeks off. Or I want a sabbatical over the summer because me and my wife want to go live in England for the entire summer.
Right. Whatever it is you want to do.
You know what? I want to go live over there for 3 months and I'm working remotely during that time period, or I'm quitting. Take your pick. You've got that option. The other is I'm out of here. Now I need to spend a little bit of time, or I should have already figured out, okay, I'm going to quit. What am I going to do afterwards? So I'm going to sit down with my bucket list and I'm going to go through that. And you know what? I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. So maybe I'm going to start looking at other businesses, other income streams. Maybe I need to learn some new stuff to do some other businesses or income streams and keep growing those dollars over time.
Well, or it could just be other interests you have, whatever those might be. And some of them might end up making you some extra money. Some might not. You might want to go do volunteer work. You're into nonprofits, whatever your interests are. Yeah. That Freedom Day lifestyle that puts you in that position to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the fun part about it. It's challenging myself and pushing myself further and further, and that book business didn't start big. I made a couple $100 on books and then I learned how to market them a little bit better. And, by the end of last year, that was a couple $1,000 coming in per month.
Well, but again, it's just you have options. You have more options. And those things are of interest to you. Those may not be of interest to somebody else that's reached financial independence and then gotten to their Freedom Day. They may have a completely different set of things that they're interested in. The
more power to you.
Spend your time doing those things. So speaking of books, tell us about when does the book come out?
Actually, I'm going to finish editing it next week. So it's changed its title, by the way. So the book is now called The Retirement Trap, or Overcoming the Retirement Trap. And it's an 8-step method to help you, find your Freedom Day. And so the book will be coming out. It'll be coming out about third week of May. It'll be launched. It's been a labor of love about 2 years, but yeah, the book it tells the whole story, good, bad. During this process, we almost lost our house. I basically spent our entire retirement savings that I'd spent 25 years building. It was a horrible, horrible beginning because I didn't do things right. And I share with you, if you just do things the way I tell you to, it's going to be a lot less painful. I can't promise that it's not going to be painful, but it'll be a lot less painful and you'll take less risk.
Well, we can learn from your mistakes.
My plan is that most people, if you read the book and you follow the steps, within 5 years, you should have your financial freedom. That's my goal.
Wow, man, that's awesome. So Overcoming the Retirement Trap.
And so you can get that. Yeah, you can get that through www.freedomdaymethod.com.
Okay, and that's your website for the Freedom Day Method. Okay, so I'll put links for those in the show notes. So I encourage people to go get that. I didn't mention up front your podcast. What's your podcast?
The Freedom Nation podcast. And it started with me sharing stuff about this, and I fell back into the trap that I always do, which is I love people's stories. And so most of the show is me interviewing people that have had this journey. And some of them are not necessarily at their Freedom Day financially, but they've gone off and done something that they really, truly love and enjoy and feel like they're adding to the world. Or, Jen Drummond is probably one of my favorite stories of all time. You'll find her in the book. So there's in each chapter of the book, I have one person that I've interviewed on the show and their story, and then it links to the YouTube episode. So, if Jen Drummond's story resonates with you, you can watch the whole interview with Jen and just quickly, Jen was a super hyper successful entrepreneur, beautiful, beautiful lady, got into a horrible car accident and almost died. And she kind of came out of that with, okay, life is just too short. And I almost saw that happen. And so she was like, what can I do to do something big? And Jen's just a big person, big, picture person. And so what Jen decided to do was she wanted to go climb the 7 second summits of the world. So it's interesting because in my life, I have met the person who the first person to climb the 7 summits, which are the tallest mountains in the world. And I've met the person who set the world record for climbing the 7 second summit. She's the first woman to do this in the Guinness Book of World Records. She just finished, I think, in 2023. When I interviewed her, she had just like 6 months before climbed the last one, which quite frankly, you know anything about them, the second summits I think are harder. It doesn't include Everest, but it includes K2, which is a booger bear to climb. So she is just an amazing person. It was just such a cool interview to interview people like that. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, cool. Okay. So people can check that out too, the Freedom Nation podcast.
It's on Amazon and all that. I also, the ones I really enjoy, I'll throw up on YouTube as well. So you can find them on YouTube.
Okay, great. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it's super useful information. I encourage people to grab the book and, start working towards your Freedom Day and teaching your kids or start a family business. I think, great ideas. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks, Dominic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FI for Kids podcast. Please support the show by hitting subscribe and receive new episodes every Thursday. The intro and exit music this episode are courtesy of Douglas Cameron. As always, you can find links to the FI for Kids music in the show notes. Thanks again, and we'll talk next week.
You're like the horizon. I can't reach you, you're so far away. And if I run to the place I want you to stay, you'd be gone. I'd be left wondering why you moved on, and why you never said goodbye. I can't wait any longer. I see the writing on the wall. It's time for us to say, tomorrow we are yesterday. Tomorrow we are yesterday. You're like the sunset. You're glowing bright, but you're fading. And what I don't get is why I'm left here waiting. But I'm like a phoenix. I'm rising from this fire. It's something we can't fix. I guess it's time for us to retire. I can't